All right, so welcome to the deep dive, where we kind of go deep, like the name suggests, into some really, really fascinating ideas. And today we've got a piece that's pretty foundational in economic thought.
Absolutely.
And we're going to try to draw out for you the most crucial insights and make this whole thing a little easier to digest.
Yeah, that's what we're here for, kind of cutting through all that noise and getting right to the heart of it.
Yeah, so today we're diving into F.A. Hayek's The Use of Knowledge in Society,
Mm,
or at least a really well-done modern adaptation of it. And it clocks in around 20 minutes or so.
okay.
But don't let that fool you. It's jam-packed with some really thought-provoking concepts, and we're going to try to lay it all out for you.
Sounds good.
All right, so the use of knowledge in society essentially gets right to the core of how any economic system actually organizes itself.
Mm.
And
Yeah, it's one of those fundamental questions that doesn't always get the attention it deserves.
right, and it has huge implications for how we look at different economic approaches, their strengths, weaknesses, and all that.
Absolutely.
So I want you, our listener, to consider this for a second. When you think about setting up an economic system, like from scratch, what's the first major obstacle you envision? Is it like finding enough raw materials or developing some, crazy new tech, or
Yeah,
or is there something even more basic that needs to be figured out first?
yeah. And Hayek actually starts right there. He paints this picture of a world where we have perfect information.
Mhm.
We know everyone's desires. We know every single resource that's out there and the most efficient way to produce anything.
Okay, so in this world we have, like a giant spreadsheet with every single variable plugged in.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And in that kind of world, it seems like economics would just be, pure calculation, just figuring out the optimal trade-offs.
Like solving some giant equation.
Exactly. But here's where it gets interesting. Hayek argues that those mathematical tools, those, elegant models, they miss the point because the real problem isn't a lack of math. It's that this perfect information that's needed for those models to work, it just doesn't exist in the real world.
Okay, so let's dig into that a little bit.
Hmm?
So it's not that nobody knows anything,
Well,
right? The issue is, where is all this information located? Where is it?
That's it. That's Hayek's big insight. It's
Oh,
the fact that knowledge is dispersed. It's not all concentrated in one spot, like waiting to be accessed.
right.
Instead, it exists in countless little pieces spread out among, millions of people.
So each person kind of has their own unique puzzle piece, right?
Exactly. Everyone has their own knowledge about what they want, their
Yeah.
own local resources, the specific circumstances they're dealing with.
So the economic puzzle isn't just about allocating these, existing resources. It's about how to tap into this knowledge that's scattered across everybody in society. These individual insights that no central planner could ever fully grasp.
Yeah, and I think the key point there is that it's not just that it's scattered, it's that any attempt to centralize it, that knowledge,
Right.
you inevitably lose so much vital context-specific information,
Yeah.
and that just cripples your ability to actually make good decisions.
Okay, so you're saying like the act of trying to gather it all together
Yeah,
kind of destroys it.
exactly.
It's kind of like, like quantum mechanics.
Right.
The act of observing something
Changes it.
changes it, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so Hayek's kind of concerned that some modern economic theories, especially those, that love their math models, might be missing this point.
Yeah, he's worried that they're kind of sweeping this problem under the rug by assuming that everyone has access to the same perfect information, because it makes the models work out nicely.
Right. They need to make that assumption to make their models work.
But that's not how the world really works.
That's not how the world works, right?
Sure.
It's like trying to understand, like a rainforest or something just by looking at a map. You miss all the, little details of the individual trees and the, the terrain and all that stuff.
Exactly. It's too simplified.
Yeah. Right. And Hayek even kind of hints that this whole mindset, applying natural science thinking, with its focus on these like universal laws, might not be the best fit for economics, which deals with human actions and subjective knowledge.
Right. It's a different beast altogether.
Yeah, it's a different beast,
Yeah.
right? So if this idea of, perfect information is like a fantasy, okay, what are the real options for organizing an economy?
Right. And this brings us to planning.
Planning.
Now, when we say planning in economics, we just mean making decisions about how resources get used.
Right, allocating those resources.
Yeah, and Hayek points out that all economic systems, they all involve some form of planning. But the key difference is who's doing it. Is it a central authority or is it a bunch of individual decisions?
So even in what we might call like a free market, individuals and businesses, they're constantly making plans, right, about what to produce, how much to consume, where to invest.
Absolutely. It's not planning versus no planning. It's about who's doing the planning.
So the big question then is like, how does the knowledge that all these individuals have, how does that get communicated and integrated into these economic plans?
Yeah, that's the core issue.
So it's not about planning or no planning. It's about who is the planner.
Exactly.
Right.
And Hayek really lays out this core choice. He says it's between centralized planning, where you have some central body making all the big decisions,
Right.
versus decentralized planning, which basically happens through the interactions of a ton of independent individuals, through competition in markets.
Right. And he actually brings up a third option too, right?
He does. He mentions this idea of delegating planning to organized industries, which is basically, monopolies.
Right. Yeah. So like giving the power
To a specific group.
to a specific group. Right. Yeah. And he's not a huge fan of that either.
No, he's not. He argues that it can be just as bad at stifling innovation and preventing that, good use of dispersed knowledge as centralized planning can be.
Right. Because ultimately, like the test of whether an economic system is good is how well it taps into and uses all that knowledge that exists across society.
Yeah,
Right.
that's the real measure.
So is it better to try and funnel all that information to one point, and hope that they can process it and make the right calls? Or is it better to give individuals the info they need to coordinate their own plans with everyone else?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question.
Right. And Hayek then gets into this really cool distinction between different kinds of knowledge because, today we really value like scientific technical knowledge, right?
Oh, absolutely. We tend to think that the people with the fancy degrees and the specialized training, they have the most valuable knowledge.
Yeah, the experts, right?
The experts. Yeah.
But Hayek says, hold on, there's another type of knowledge that's just as important, but we often overlook it.
Yeah, and he calls this knowledge of specific circumstances of time and place.
Okay, so it's not the universal principles or the scientific formulas. It's the very specific localized details that individuals on the ground are aware of.
Exactly. It's the practical day-to-day knowledge that you get from actually doing a job, understanding the local conditions, being aware of those fleeting opportunities that pop up.
Right, and it's hard to write that down in a textbook or teach it in a classroom.
You can't. It's almost impossible to transmit that kind of knowledge through formal channels,
It's like you got to be there.
You got to be there. You got to live it.
Yeah. Can you give it some examples of this in action?
Sure. Think about a shipper who, knows they've got some extra space in their truck on a specific route, and they find a customer last minute who needs something shipped, or a real estate agent who really knows their local market inside and out and can capitalize on, a sudden shift in buyer or seller sentiment.
Okay.
Or even someone doing arbitrage, buying something where it's cheap and selling it where it's expensive. They're all using this very specific localized knowledge.
Arbitrage, that's an interesting one. So arbitrage, that's essentially just like, taking advantage of price differences between different markets, right?
Exactly. They're exploiting those temporary discrepancies.
Right. So it's about being in the right place at the right time.
Yeah, and recognizing an opportunity that most people would miss.
And it's funny how we view success that comes from this kind of knowledge. Like sometimes it's seen as less legitimate than success that comes from like formal expertise.
Yeah, it's like they got lucky or something instead of actually having skill or insight.
Like they just stumbled into it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And Hayek points out that even economists who you'd think would, be hip to all this, they sometimes fall into this trap too.
Yeah, their models often assume that all the relevant information is just, readily available to everyone.
Which is the whole problem we're talking about.
Exactly. It's not just about the knowledge being out there somewhere. It's about figuring out how to make that scattered knowledge actually usable in making economic decisions.
Right. And that kind of leads into Hayek's discussion of change, the role of change in the economy.
Right. Because he argues that this tendency to undervalue local knowledge, it's linked to this tendency to downplay the importance of constant adjustment.
Okay.
A lot of central planning models, they assume that the economy is pretty stable, big changes happen rarely, and you can plan for them in advance.
Right, like you set the plan and you just execute it.
Exactly. But Hayek says, no economic problems actually arise from change.
Because if everything stayed the same, you wouldn't need to make any new decisions.
Exactly. The very fact that we need to make a decision means that something has changed and we got to adapt.
And so the initial plan is no longer valid.
Right. It's obsolete.
Okay.
And Hayek really challenges this idea that, Modern production, with all its fancy tech, has somehow made these day-to-day adjustments less important.
Right, like we've got computers and AI and all this stuff, so we don't need to worry about the little things.
Yeah, we can just automate everything and it'll run smoothly. But he uses this example of businesses, competing in the market and how much effort they have to put in just to keep their costs down, even with all the advanced tech they've got.
Right, so it's not like you build a factory and then, everything just runs perfectly forever.
No, you need constant vigilance.
Right.
One little slip up in management and boom, you've lost your advantage.
And that's where all those little bits of knowledge, those little insights that people on the ground have become so important.
Absolutely, because they're the ones who can spot those opportunities to tweak things, to become just a little bit more efficient, to make those tiny adjustments that keep everything running smoothly.
And economists, they love their big statistics and their aggregate data.
Right, they're looking at the big picture.
Right, so they might miss these constant micro-level changes because the overall numbers look pretty stable.
Yeah, it's like looking at a huge crowd. You see this general flow of movement, but you're missing all the individual decisions that each person is making about where to step,
That's a great way to put it, yeah. And Hayek argues that this apparent stability in the big picture, it's not just random, things canceling each other out.
Right.
It's actually the result of tons of deliberate adjustments that are happening every single day based on all those immediate local circumstances.
It's this constant dance of adaptation happening beneath the surface.
So like a million little tiny ballet dancers all moving in sync, but in different ways.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And he gives this example of, one company failing to deliver and another company stepping in to fill the gap.
Okay.
Or how even these massive automated plants, they rely on this huge web of external suppliers for all the parts they don't make themselves.
So they're not as self-sufficient as they might seem.
Not at all. They depend on all these tiny connections and that knowledge of specific circumstances. Those details about location and quality and availability, the stuff just can't be captured in a spreadsheet.
Right.
You can't just send that information up to some central planner and expect them to make good decisions with it.
So a central planner trying to run the whole show just based on, big data.
They're going to be flying blind.
You're going to be flying blind.
They're going to miss all the crucial details.
And that's why Hayek says that for an economy to actually work well,
you need decentralization.
You need to let individuals on the ground make decisions using their unique local knowledge.
Absolutely. Give them the power to act on what they know.
Okay, so decentralization is key, but then how do all these individual decisions get coordinated, right?
Right. We can't have everyone just doing their own thing in isolation.
Right. They need to be on the same page somehow.
Exactly. And that's where the price system comes in.
Okay, so how does that work?
Well, Hayek's argument is that while individuals need some info about the broader economy, to make good decisions, they don't need to know everything.
They don't need to be economists.
They don't need to know all the intricate details of supply and demand across every single industry,
Right.
And this is where the price system shines because it acts as this incredibly efficient communication tool. Okay. Individuals don't need to know why something has become scarce or why demand has spiked.
Right.
All they need to see is the change in price.
So the price tells them everything they need to know.
Exactly. The price signal contains all the info they need to adjust their behavior.
Can you give us an example of this?
Sure. Let's take tin, like Hayek does.
Okay.
So let's say a new use for tin is discovered, or maybe there's a disruption in the supply chain, whatever the reason.
Right.
The price of tin is going to go up.
Okay.
And people who use tin, they'll see that price increase and they'll start economizing. Maybe they'll use less tin, maybe they'll find substitutes.
Right.
But they don't need to know the specifics of why the price went up.
They don't need to know the whole backstory.
Exactly. The price alone tells them what they need to know.
It's like this silent language that everyone understands.
Yeah, exactly.
Even if they don't speak the same, verbal language. Right.
It transcends those barriers.
And the way prices connect everything is just mind-blowing.
Yeah, you get a change in one tiny part of the economy.
Right.
And it ripples out through the whole system, through these price adjustments. It affects so many other goods and services.
So the price system is like this giant decentralized information network.
Yeah, it's like a web that connects all the individual decisions and makes sure they're at least somewhat coordinated.
And it does all this without anyone being in charge.
No central planner, no CEO of the economy.
It's crazy when you think about it.
It really is. It achieves a level of coordination that you'd think would only be possible with, one mind controlling everything.
Yeah, like some supercomputer.
Yeah,
Right.
but it's all done through these simple price signals.
And Hayek really wants us to see prices not just as like dollar amounts,
Right.
but as these information signals.
Yeah, he says we need to view the price system as this vital communication channel.
And he does point out that it works best when prices are flexible, when they can move freely in response to changes in supply and demand.
Absolutely, if prices get stuck, if they can't adjust, then the flow of information gets disrupted.
And the system gets clunky.
Yeah, it becomes less efficient.
But even when prices are a little sticky, like they don't move as quickly as they should,
Right.
those underlying economic realities, they still kind of manifest in other ways.
Yeah, you'll see it in things like longer wait times or, products becoming unavailable.
Right, like if something's really scarce, but the price can't go up, you're going to see shortages.
Exactly. The system finds a way to adjust even if it's not ideal.
Right, and what's amazing is how little each individual needs to know.
Yeah, they don't need to be an economist. They just need to watch a few key prices that are relevant to them.
Like an engineer watching their gauges.
Exactly. They see a price move and they adjust accordingly. They don't need to know why it moved. They don't need to know the whole chain of events that led up to it.
Right.
The price tells them everything they need to know.
He uses that example of a raw material becoming scarce, right? And how like tens of thousands of people will start using it more sparingly just because the price went up.
Yeah, and no one had to tell them to do it. There was no government mandate, no big announcement. It just happened organically.
It's like this invisible hand guiding everyone's behavior.
Right. It's this emergent system that arises from all these individual interactions.
And Hayek says that if we had actually designed this system intentionally,
Right.
if we sat down and said, hey, let's create a way to coordinate all this economic activity based on dispersed knowledge,
Yeah.
we would consider it one of our greatest achievements.
Yeah, it would be like, landing on the moon or something.
Right. But the problem is it wasn't designed. It just kind of evolved,
Really, it emerged organically.
And so we take it for granted.
Yeah, we don't fully appreciate it.
And that's why people who advocate for more, central planning or top-down control, they often just don't get it.
Yeah, they fail to grasp the power of the price system to coordinate activity based on knowledge that's spread out across so many people.
And Hayek even compares this to other systems that evolve spontaneously,
Yeah.
like language
Right.
or cultural traditions.
Yeah, those things weren't designed either. They just emerged from countless interactions over time.
And they enable these incredibly complex forms of coordination.
Yeah, think about language. It allows us to communicate such a vast range of ideas and concepts.
And we do it without even thinking about the rules,
Right, it just works.
We just know how to speak.
And Hayek quotes Alfred Whitehead. He talks about how civilization advances by increasing the number of things we can do without having to think about them.
It's a powerful point.
It is.
We rely on all these systems and tools that we don't fully understand, but they're essential for our modern world.
Yeah, it's like we're standing on the shoulders of giants. All this accumulated knowledge and wisdom that's baked into these systems that we just take for granted.
And so in Hayek's view, the price system is like one of these, spontaneously evolved tools. It allows this complex division of labor to happen, and it coordinates resource allocation based on knowledge that's distributed across everyone.
And he contrasts that with consciously designed systems, none of which have really managed to replicate those key features of a market economy.
Right, like individual freedom of choice and the ability to use your own personal knowledge and skills.
Exactly. Those things get lost when you try to plan everything from the top down.
And it's interesting in the conclusion of this piece, they talk about how the whole economic debate has kind of shifted over time.
Yeah.
The necessity of the price system for a complex society. It's not really a big political battle anymore.
It's more of an intellectual discussion now. People are starting to recognize that markets do play a vital role.
Right. He mentions people like Trotsky and Lange and Lerner, who are all big proponents of centralized planning.
And they all came to acknowledge the importance of market mechanisms,
Yeah.
in one way or another.
So it seems like that basic insight about the power of price signals.
It's becoming more widely accepted.
Right. But there are still some disagreements.
Yeah.
And Hayek suggests that those are more about differences in methodology, like how people approach the problem.
Yeah, he uses Schumpeter as an example.
Right.
Schumpeter had this view that focused a lot on objective quantities, the numbers, and he kind of downplayed the importance of human knowledge and interaction.
So he was missing that key element of knowledge dispersal.
Exactly. And Schumpeter had this argument that consumers, when they evaluate goods, they're implicitly also evaluating the means of production, you know?
Okay.
Like they're taking into account all the factors that went into making that product.
So if I like this, loaf of bread, I'm implicitly saying that I approve of all the methods that were used to grow the wheat and mill the flour and bake the bread.
Right, but Hayek points out that's just not realistic. That knowledge about all those production processes.
Yeah.
It's not centralized. It's spread out among all these different people.
So my enjoyment of the bread doesn't magically tell everyone the best way to make it.
Exactly. It requires a ton of localized knowledge, and that's where prices come in.
Yeah.
They help to coordinate all those dispersed bits of knowledge.
So the real economic problem isn't what would happen if all the knowledge was in one place.
Right.
It's how do we deal with the fact that it's not?
How do we create systems that can function effectively in a world of dispersed knowledge?
Right. And that's what Hayek is trying to get at.
Exactly.
So to wrap this whole thing up, this deep dive into Hayek's ideas, it really highlights the huge challenge of economic organization when knowledge isn't just sitting there in a neat little package.
Yeah.
It shows the power of decentralized decision-making and the importance of the price system as this communication tool that lets individuals coordinate their actions even with limited knowledge.
And it makes you think, in our modern world, we rely so much on these consciously designed systems.
Right.
But maybe we should be paying more attention to those systems that have evolved spontaneously, like the price mechanism.
Maybe there's more wisdom in those systems than we realize.
Maybe there's a lot we can learn from those seemingly uncontrolled aspects of our lives.
Yeah, like maybe we're trying to control too much,
Maybe.
Maybe we should let go a little bit and see what emerges.
It's definitely something to think about.
Yeah, it's a really thought-provoking idea. And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive.
Sounds good.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And we'll catch you next time.